Hello everybody, this is ManuS and welcome to another Legends of Runeterra metagame breakdown. I skipped last week because of the balance changes, but now we have a bit more of a week of the new balance patch to look at and talk about, and there is a lot to unpack and things are just getting started, so this is going to be a particularly exciting episode, I think, and I hope you guys enjoy it and feel similar. Let me know in the comments how you feel. Anyway, before we dive right in, you know the drill. Hit the subscribe button down below to not miss out on future content. And let me briefly introduce you to today's sponsor before we get started. Today's video is sponsored by NordVPN, one of the leading virtual private network providers out there. A virtual private network keeps your data secure and yourself anonymous while using the internet. NordVPN comes with super fast servers, allows you to unlock your favorite entertainment websites like Netflix. They provide a 30-day money-back guarantee. They also have an included cybersecurity suite, which acts as an ad blocker to boot. They don't lock any of your data, provide a 24/7 customer support, and you can use it on up to 6 simultaneous connections, so one account covers most or all of your electronic devices. And most importantly, they don't have any bandwidth limit, so you can use it non-stop without it getting throttled, which is particularly important for heavy users like us. It also won multiple awards and comes highly recommended by top technology experts. So if you're still surfing online without a VPN, now is the time to change that. Get NordVPN now, 70% off for a 3-year plan, including 1 month extra for free using the code ManuS or the personalized link in the description down below. And now on to today's content. Alright, so now that we got that out of the way, let's take a look at the decks. So in 5th place in terms of popularity, we have the new face of Ezreal. Before the balance changes, people tried to make this work quite a bunch and it never quite got there. The deck actually got a bit of a mixed bag of buffs and nerfs. Black Market Merchant and the nab mechanic got nerfed a bit by not being able to high roll anymore and Merchant being more fragile now. But there was also a buff to Petty Officer, which is neat, and obviously there were nerfs to other things that helped here. Like this deck, for example, was pretty bad against They Who Endure, which has since mostly faded, especially at Master, since the nerfs usually make people gravitate towards, even if the nerfs aren't that big, gravitate towards new things that are at least slightly better than the nerfs. That's the thing, like, it's not necessarily that They Who Endure is so bad that it's unplayable, it's just worse enough that there are better things to do, in a way, and that's what we're seeing here. And the disappearance of especially They Who Endure itself makes something like this a lot more viable, and yeah, a lot more competitive than in the past when people were trying it. I think that's a major contributing factor. Some people had success with this. The numbers we are looking here today are still pretty small for Master after a bit more than a week, so keep that in mind, but they give us an indication. So this is an interesting direction. It's a more low to the ground, more proactive Ezreal deck with Jagged Butcher, which is a pretty interesting addition, and I liked it in other decks like Gangplank Thresh, where it doesn't seem like an obvious inclusion, but actually does quite a lot, and it's no different here. I'm not entirely sure if you want to run actual warning shots to make the Butchers and Merchants better. You can kind of just play Butcher turn 1 as a 2/2, and then, for example, turn 2 attack and get Merchant going, or just wait till turn 3 to go like Make It Rain into Merchant plus Pilfered Goods, or any of the like 3 plunder cards basically. And Warning Shot is a bit awkward, and you have the Yordle Grifters for later Warning Shot stuff and Riptide Rex enabling, and especially in a deck like this Ezreal deck, I'm not sure if Warning Shot is where you want to be, but I like the addition of Butcher. Could totally see the Warning Shots being wrong. I would also probably gravitate towards 3 Static Shocks. Sure, that would add one more PNZ card to the deck with an Allegiance card, but once again, Grifter is one of these Allegiance cards that's less bad when it whiffs. It's just really good when it doesn't, but it is fine to just be a 3/3 that gives you a free Warning Shot enabling powerful effects, especially like Riptide Rex. And Static Shock is just so good. It's good with Ezreal, it's good with Twisted Fate, it's good with your Kex. It just does a lot. So I would be inclined to lean towards running just 3 Static Shock and maybe axing the Salvage. The one of Salvage is a bit odd here. But yeah, in general, this is an interesting deck to explore. Not sure how well it will be positioned long term, but right now it seems to be doing pretty well. Anyway, on to number 4. Fourth most popular deck is the new Braum Anivia deck, given that we had buffs to Braum and to Anivia, and in the last patch also a buff to Kindly Tavern Keeper. Makes this one of the new kids on the block, and I think at least 2 people have been fighting for rank 1 with this deck in the last couple of days on NA, making this a pretty serious competitor. I mostly like this version. It has Aristocrat over the initial Omen Hawk that I think Good Day Maverick was running, that I think first had success with the deck. Not sure if he came up with the list, but he was the first one to succeed with it, take rank 1. And I mean, to be fair, this general concept is kind of like floating around. But one of the more interesting things he had was the Fury of the North that weren't like super obvious. But yeah, I think I like Aristocrat better, since unless you're hitting like, I don't know, Tavern Keeper or Braum, Omen Hawk doesn't do that much, and the unit density isn't very high, so it can take multiple turns till you even draw the impacted unit. The other thing that I like here is the removal of the box. Just not super high on the card, but I could be wrong. Maybe the card is worthwhile, but the people that played this list, which was the most popular one right now, seem to agree. I would probably, however, cut a Fury or a Chronicler again to go up to 3 Grasp. Grasp just seems really, really good against the Noxus aggro decks and stuff like that. It's just a very solid card to have, and seems wrong to me to only have 2 of them. Otherwise, I quite like this list, and it seems like it might be one of the mainstays going forward for now. Next we have good old Vi Heimerdinger. Nobody's surprised to see this here, I think, with nothing being affected by the patch. Also things around it not changing much in a way that is bad for the deck. Sure, the Noxus aggro decks can be a bit challenging, but they are not like aggressive in a way that is inherently bad for the deck. It's just not an easy matchup, but it's also not like as bad as say Burn, like actual old Burn was, for example. So this just sticks around as one of the top decks, and also in popularity. I think the popularity of the deck is deflated a bit by the fact that it's not that easy to play and to like maximize its win rate. So if it was easier to play, it would even be more popular than it already is. Next we have Misfortune Bannerman. Basically, it's Bannerman currently with the buff of Petty Officer, playing Petty Officer and Misfortune. There is a more aggressive version with Lucian and Senna, and this a bit bigger, more mid-rangey version with Quinn. I lumped them together, which is why they ended up in second place. They were both at 306 games, so 612 total, because they're basically the same archetype, just with slight variations in terms of champions and minor slots. Basically, the Lucian version plays Lucian instead of Quinn, and they, I think, play 3 spells less, and instead play Senna as an additional 3-drop, which is fine, but first of all, I think this version had a better win rate, and second of all, it seems like the more sound version to me. But I could be wrong, like Lucian and Senna are pretty nice too, and have some appeal. But this is just like a bit more robust and tried and true, sort of. But we'll see which of the versions is gonna turn out to be the default one. I might do some testing myself of the 2 approaches and see which I like more and how. And in first place, we currently have the Noxus aggro deck. Primary version is Splashing Shadow Owls. I lumped together here the numbers of Draven Darius and Elise Darius. Otherwise, they are exactly the same list. Some just play Elise over Draven, and that's why we end up with these numbers. I am not even counting all the Freljord splashing decks that are basically the same list, except that they play Freljord cards instead of like Atrocity, Harrowing, and Draven, so to speak. So this deck is like very, very popular and one of the big things to come out of the patch because of the buff to Basilisk Rider and Darius. And yeah, so this is the deck you will probably face the most in Master right now in some form. And like I said, there are multiple versions. There are versions that lightly splash around 6 PNZ cards, 6 Bilgewater cards, usually Misfortune and Petty Officer, or Freljord cards, Omen Hawk usually, and Raider or Fury or something like that. And then this version. I would heavily advise against splashing too many cards. I like this version only splashing 4 cards, since the thing is, Basilisk Rider whiffing its allegiance is horrible. A 5-3 non-overwhelm is so much worse than a 6-4 overwhelm in so many ways that it's super devastating, which is also why I recommend against the Elise splash, because that puts you at 7 Shadow Isles cards, which is really, really bad. Like in general, I would never play more than 6 splash cards in an Allegiance deck, other than maybe a Yordle Crystal deck where you're playing it more for the warning shot than anything else, like that Ezreal deck that we saw. And otherwise, try to play at most 6 or ideally 4 or 5 splash cards in a lot of cases, depending on how good or bad your Allegiance card is, if it whiffs, and how essential it is to your deck. And I feel like this deck doesn't really have much room. Like it's a very like curve aggressive deck. If your turn 4 Basilisk Rider turns into a 5-3 non-overwhelm, that's super devastating because you don't have that much late game. While, for example, Elusive sometimes can take a whiffed Wayfinder much better in a fair share of games than this deck can a whiffed Basilisk Rider, which is why I would stay away even from 6 splash cards ideally. But yeah, this deck, very popular, doing pretty well. I played it a bunch. I haven't been like super happy with it, but it has been very solid, at least, and other people are crushing with it. Maybe I just haven't played it enough. It's certainly my kind of deck, both in terms of what I'm good at and also what I enjoy playing. But yeah, I had some mixed feelings about it, but it is very popular, and we'll see how it sort of settles down. If you look at the win rates of the deck, it actually also doesn't have that insane of a win rate, so my impression might actually be like quite decent. Since it's not like the deck felt bad to me, it just felt more like kind of a second grade deck in terms of win rate relative to how high win rates can be with some better options. It has a good win rate, but it doesn't have a great win rate, and if there are decks that have a great win rate, why play a deck that has a good win rate, right? So yeah, those are the top 5 most popular decks in Master right now. Numbers are still pretty small, but yeah, as you can see, this is the standout sort of deck. Especially if you add in like the other splash variants, you easily get past 1,000 games played, which is more than twice as much as any other archetype we looked at. And now on to the win rates. So speaking of good but not great win rate, we have the deck in 5th place actually. 58.3, that is just the Draven Darius version, not the Elise version. The Elise version has a lower win rate, I think 75.8 or something, so 0.5% difference. Obviously the sample sizes aren't super big, but I can see these numbers being more than variance and making sense since, like I said, running 7 Shadow Isles cards in an Allegiance deck where the Allegiance card is really, really bad and is really devastating to whiff, and adding Elise not even doing that much because you have 9 2-drops, Draven being a fine 3-drop in a deck that only has 1 3-drop otherwise is totally fine. I don't see you swapping Draven with Elise gives you a very minor power level boost maybe, but it also notably costs your Basilisk Rider, which probably costs you more overall power than Elise over Draven gets you. So just stick with Draven, make your deck more consistent, and you're fine. No need to like mess with that for such a marginal gain. Like I think the gain of adding a card that weakens your allegiance needs to be major in comparison, and turning your second 3-drop into your fourth 2-drop, just yeah, doesn't really do that much. So yeah, just don't do it. It's not a major gain. So just make your Allegiance card as good as you can. And yeah, 58.3, very solid, but more like top-end tier 2-ish relative to what the other decks have in terms of win rate, which is not too surprising. It's a low-end tier 1, bottom-end tier 2, top-end tier 2 type deck, I think, going forward. And it's something that is easily accessible and people enjoy, so we'll see it quite a bunch, but it's not among the absolute like top performers. Next, we have Vi Heimerdinger. It's not just popular, it's also still doing really well, and you see the win rate gap between Vi Heimerdinger in 4th place and yeah, the Noxus aggro deck in 5th place. More than 3% win rate difference, which is very notable, and kind of the difference between a good tier 2 deck and a tier 1 deck, I think. In terms of win rate, like obviously there are more things that go into the things, and tier 1 decks can have worse win rates temporarily than tier 2 decks because of positioning and people hating on it and stuff. There's a lot more inherent stuff that makes a deck tier 1 than the win rate, but if you talk about win rates, there are obviously tier win rates, like tier 1 win rates, tier 2 win rates, but you can still basically have tier 2 decks with a tier 1 win rate at a certain point in time, making it the deck to play, for example, but still not making it an actual tier 1 deck. It just has a tier 1 win rate, since win rate is not the defining factor, or should not be the defining factor of whether you think of a deck as tier 1 or tier 2. It's more of a like inherent thing of inherent power, universality, consistency, that sort of stuff. Just being a very well-rounded, reliable deck that basically has sort of a tier 2 win rate in its worst positioning and an insane tier 1 win rate in its best positioning, while a tier 2 deck has more of like a good tier 1 win rate in its best position and probably like a tier 3 win rate in its best positioning, in its worst positioning, or something like that, if that makes sense. Since people often confuse the like tier X win rate with tier X deck and stuff, they are not kind of the same. They are just because obviously if you have different win rates, you can also sort them in tiers the same way you sort decks in tiers, but you don't sort decks in tiers based on their win rate tiers, so to speak. But yeah, Heimerdinger, tier 1 deck, tier 1 win rate, popular. What else is new, right? Then we have the Braum and Nivea deck, also doing pretty well, slightly better than the Vi Heimerdinger, but around the same, obviously. 61.8%. Deck has the potential to be a tier 1 deck. Like, it's very consistent, well-rounded, has strong cards, is kind of unique at what it does in the way it plays, so can totally see this, yeah, not just being a flavor of the week that is doing well, but also like inherently a tier 1 deck that will stick around until things change again, in terms of balancing. But yeah, until then, make sure you are aware of this deck. Then we have the Misfortune Quinn deck again. By the way, the Misfortune Quinn also was the one with the better win rate, I think, as of now. And same win rate as the Braum and Nivea deck. I put it second because the sample size was higher, basically. 61.8% of the overall archetype. That includes the Lucian versions, but the version we are looking at is the highest win rate list that I could find with a decent sample size of the archetype. Because normally in the most played decks, I show you the most popular list, and here I try to show you the highest win rate version of like list for the archetype that also has a decent win rate. Oftentimes they are the same, but not always. And last but not least, we have the Azrael Twisted Fate deck. It's not just starting to get popular, it's also doing really, really well right now. But keep in mind, win rate at the sample size is really low. It's below 400 games, so this is almost certainly inflated and will go down noticeable amount. But it could still stay above 60%, like low 60s, which would be very, very good. And we'll see how it shakes up. But yeah, 64.5 is not a sustainable long-term win rate, especially for a deck like this that I think has some very obvious weaknesses in that it is not that great at handling sort of robust pressure and board presence. I can see this being a bit awkward into like the Noxus aggro deck or the Demacia deck, for example, because they just curve out with really like high stat units that this deck is like only so well equipped to deal with. But yeah, I could be wrong, but that would be my guess of like what the deck struggles against. Yeah, these are the top 5 most popular and top 5 highest win rate decks, plus some of my thoughts on their positioning, how things will change, and what I would question or adjust in the list potentially. What do you guys think? How do you like the latest balance patch? How do you like the metagame right now? How do you feel about these lists and my opinions on those? Let's have a discussion in the comments down below. And of course, I'll be back to streaming probably tomorrow. I have taken a couple days break, figure out some real life stuff, but I'll be back to jam some in the new metagame and see which decks I like and stuff like that. Yeah, that's it again for this time. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe on your way out if you enjoy the content, and show the sponsors in the description some love as well. I'm your host ManuS. I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.